What an absurdity to again be called to this council to again discuss the humanitarian situation in Gaza, especially when this council has failed to hold one single session on the real reasons behind this terrible war, behind the horrific attack on October 7th. The Council should be discussing Hamas, a word that I didn't hear from my colleague. He doesn't know that they exist, and its destructive and barbaric agenda to destroy Israel, public agenda, orchestrated by Iran. Iran's intentions are to destroy the Israeli people using currently their terror proxies, in the future also their nuclear capabilities. While we sit here, our hostages are still held in Gaza in the hands of Hamas. Just this week, our forces rescued 5 hostage bodies from a terror tunnel. Where? In a humanitarian zone. Yeah, you heard correctly. Hostage bodies in a humanitarian zone. And yet, there has not been one meeting, formal meeting, in this council, not on what started the war, and not even to discuss ways to advance the release of the hostages. Not even one formal meeting. This fact disgraces the council. Colleagues, Israel is and will always be committed to our extensive humanitarian efforts in the Gaza Strip. When earnestly examining the facts at hand, you will see the immense lengths to which Israel has gone to protect civilian lives. Do you think a country which wants to harm civilians would allow 828,000 tons of aid to enter the Strip? Not from the Egyptian border only, from our borders also. Would such a country permit over 42,000 trucks to enter via land routes, 9,931 pallets of aerial drops, and 432 trucks through the maritime route? It is the State of Israel which organized and facilitated this aid, all while under a massive attacks from Hamas on our own forces, while we facilitate the enter of this aid. We continue to work tirelessly with our international partners to support the people of Gaza. We have facilitated direct and around-the-clock contact between the UN, the IDF Southern Command, and COGAT. But you didn't bother to visit, of course, our side and see the efforts, only the Egyptian side. 11 field hospitals have been established thus far, with 3 under construction. Since October 7th, Israel has consistently ushered in food, water, fuel, medical supplies, and other essentials. Israel stands ready to provide further support. And to those who falsely and maliciously claim that Israel has prevented the provision of aid, the real numbers show that of the 42,000 aid trucks, less than 1% have been refused entry since October, and only for security reasons. But of course, the UN representatives are only focused on and amplify this 1%. At the same time, the UN finds itself overwhelmed by the aid being provided, which it is unable to distribute because of UN's problems. The failure to distribute the aid is the main reason for the bottleneck. Why is this not the topic of today's discussion? While Israel meets its obligations, the world is being fed casualty numbers and data by the Hamas-run Gaza Ministry of Health. How can we even hold a session on the situation in Gaza without verifiable data? Why hasn't the Security Council called a meeting to ask the UN for an independent process to secure reputable information rather than trusting the words of child killers and rapists? Not only does the UN falter in its duties to coordinate aid distribution, but its agency, UNRWA, is complicit in the perpetuation of this conflict. We have provided Commissioner Lazzarini more than 100 names and military IDs of terrorist operatives currently employed by UNRWA in Gaza. You pay their salaries here. This list is part of an ongoing process and does not yet reveal the full extent of the infiltration of UNRWA by the Hamas terrorists. Why has UNRWA failed to terminate, up until today, these terrorist employees? We have also discovered numerous UNRWA facilities and headquarters used by Hamas to provide humanitarian cover for their crimes. You like to call them schools. Hamas tunnels and weapons warehouses were found under 30 UNRWA schools. How can you claim that these facilities are entitled to protection? Why are we not here discussing the desecration of these schools by Hamas and UNRWA? Why has this never been discussed? Never. Why doesn't the Security Council invite an international law expert to brief this council that a school used for terror has lost its protection under international law? Probably if you invite one, you'll invite a Palestinian legal expert, I assume. Hamas has twisted much of the aid intended for civilians into weapons of war. Where we see a water pipe, Hamas sees a rocket. Where we see a hospital, Hamas sees a headquarters. Where we see a school, Hamas sees terror tunnels. On October 7th, terrorists invaded our homes, raping, murdering, and kidnapping our civilians. May I remind you again, Israel unilaterally withdrew from the Gaza Strip 19 years ago. Today, Hamas terrorists continue to strike Israeli villages from designated humanitarian zones. Hezbollah rains down thousands of rockets and UAVs upon our north, burning town after town. Still, we have 100,000 Israelis that were displaced from their northern communities. And just last week, the Houthis struck Tel Aviv after more than 200 attacks since October 7th. You call it clashes. Until you address the head of the snake in Tehran, there is no way to bring stability to the region. Only a blind person or someone with a political agenda would not see this as a coordinated attack by proscribed terror groups to terrorize our citizens. Every single one of you knows that the reaction to this attack would look, the reaction would look like if it targeted Moscow, London, Beijing, Paris, or Washington instead of Israel. Mr. President, 115 hostages are still held captive by Hamas Nazis. The most crucial element for the end of this conflict has been excluded from this conversation. And it's not enough to remind their existence as a footnote. We cannot simply stand by as our men, women, and children remain at the mercy of these mutilators. Again, where is the meeting demanding the return of our hostages? Without their immediate and unconditional release, there is no hope for peace and security. When the brutalities of Iran and its proxies are dismissed, Israel must take its future into its own hands. We will continue to carry out the necessary operations to defeat Hamas, along with anyone who attacks our citizens. Ultimately, Israel remains committed to providing life-saving aid to Gaza, while Hamas only remains committed to destroying lives. Thank you, Mr. President.